What's going on? I'm assuming you're ready for an episode of the RR Show because you pressed play. If you didn't press play, you either did it under compulsion, which I hope is not true, and seek help, or you may have accidentally listened to this episode. If so, hey, keep listening. I think you'll like it. So let's start this episode now. What we're going to do is do a couple of stories from Malicious Compliance. We've got 2 long stories, so let's lock in and do it right now. Our first story comes from user CLH Harrison. Hopefully I said that right. My apologies if I did not. The title is, Who Says We Need That Anti-Slip Surface on the Outdoor Pavement? Everyone below you. That's who. I worked at a major tourist attraction during this time, and we got thousands of customers every day. Part of our attraction was outside, and we had expanded part of the outside to accommodate new parts of the attraction. In order to blend with the theme of the new section, a new brick pavement was installed in the area. Upper management had at the time a tendency to not make things 100%, and this was no different. The big thing was that it was decided not to install an anti-slip surface on the brick pavement. Now, we were in the middle of summer, and it was a particularly dry summer, but nonetheless, when it isn't dry, we got a lot of rain and a lot of snow and frost. We need that anti-slip surface. We told upper management this, and per usual, fell on deaf ears. Winter comes far too soon, and with it all the rain that was meant for summer, and to make up for a dry autumn, and the winter of 2022 was bad for the UK. Temperatures fell to single digits, and then negative in the Celsius. With the cold came a permanent frost over the brick pavement, and the beginning of malicious compliance. Part 2, the compliance. The first slips and falls heralded us to the idea. At the time, the company required us to write in paper accident and incident reports about everything if something bad happened. Now, anyone who's worked in tourist attractions, we've all seen kids fall from being too excited, and we often do a polite thing to see if there's blood, gore, missing limbs are present, and if it's all good, we just ignore it. No one likes paperwork. Not to mention, due to upper management's distaste for us, we had to take the long way to the offices where the paper was to fill it in, and get someone to cover us while we filled it in. Upper management hated us being in their special offices and not out with the paying customers. It is worth mentioning in their defense, our lower managers and middle managers were on our side, because even they knew what upper management was doing was utter nonsense. So they saw what we were doing and agreed with it. What happened was every single slip that occurred outside the impromptu ice rink that was the brick pavement, we would report. That's about 15 to 20 minutes of us in the warmth, not freezing our butts off, writing about how someone had slipped in the exact same manner as the last 10 people, all in plain view of upper management. I like to believe they began working from home more due to us being in their office. I learned from one of our lower managers, that is a dear friend, that the stack of reports handed to upper management was measurable in inches. I do not regret saying I was one of the top 3 contributors to that pile. Part 3, bare minimum response. Upper management finally began to make efforts to fix the situation. They decided to just corner off the vast majority of the brick pavement with temporary, ugly barriers and put down anti-slip mats to make a path for the parts of the attraction that they wanted visitors to walk in. They thought they had won. We knew better. Anyone who has worked with tourists knows that tourists are a special breed of stupid. Told not to touch the very important items, they will touch. Told to keep their kids near and not let them wander off. I think the record for no lost kids was 4 hours. And so these barriers that everyone was required to respect, Well, clearly it doesn't apply to me. Each time we told people not to go underneath these barriers, they looked like a deer caught in the headlights. And the barriers were just low enough that the kids would duck under and run straight onto the ice and onto their butts. Even more accident and incident reports rocked up as a result. And all upper management would do is tell us low, barely above minimum wage earners to do a better job policing this part of the attraction. Part 4. Wake-up call. School kids. Oh, how we loathe schools. Mostly teenager ones. Little kids no more than 5 or 10. Oh, they're delightful. We were happy with them. The main reason was because the teachers, who are still responsible for the kids no matter what, they actually followed our guidelines. So naturally, we liked the little ones, and were genuinely more concerned for them than normal. We all then had our moment of fear when it was reported that a 7-year-old boy had slipped and fallen on the ice. No doubt having been playing with classmates and unintentionally not seeing where he was going. That didn't save his 2 front teeth chipping, and a call for our on-site first aid team to come and help with the blood. Luckily, he seemed all right, besides the fact that the tooth fairy was going to pay double for that night. But for us, lower and middle management, it was the final straw. I wish I had taken a photo of that accident and incident report for posterity, the number of people co-signing it. Part 5. The fallout. Nobody wants a lawsuit, and that kid's parents had grounds to do like nobody's business. The fact the child had been injured from negligence did not look good on upper management's part, and it wasn't as if they could pretend nothing had happened. Everyone had been telling them about the risk, and when it got to the bigwigs, I can only imagine what was said. Miraculously, and with 2 days of the kid's teeth, they put an anti-slip surface on the brick pavement at what was probably more of a cost than had they just done so in the summer. The barriers were removed, and the number of accident and incident reports dramatically decreased. They also finally got around to installing tablet devices with which we could fill in the reports without needing to drop position. Our lives were made easier, they got an earful, and that kid probably has a fun story when he's older and has kids himself. I'd like to say upper management learned their lesson and took our words on board for future endeavors. But that is like expecting the dog not to poop on the carpet after the first time you shove their nose into it. I no longer work there for reasons, and many of the people who joined in that act of malicious compliance have since gone elsewhere. But for nearly 3 glorious months, you had never seen a department work together like ours in that way before or since. Our second and final story comes, of course, from r/MaliciousCompliance, posted by user Chubb70199. Dress code. This didn't happen directly to me, but a person I used to work with a couple of years back. We worked as system consultants and would travel to the sites we were assisting during the phases of projects that required being there in person. As travel costs for these trips would directly impact the budget of the project or were passed on to the client, we were encouraged to travel as lightly as we could and plan as much ahead as possible, choosing the lowest fare within reason and not go overboard with hotel and meals. Most of the time, this worked well enough. If something was out of the ordinary, usually a quick call to whomever to explain the reason behind it would clear things up, our expenses would be approved, and we'd carry on. Until the company was hired by this one customer. People there seemed to operate out of some parallel world where the constraints of the real world would not apply. Anyway, the usual policy of being cost-conscious also applied there, and the controller from the customer made a point to let us know they would not approve expenses our company or my colleague, who was a directly hired contractor, submitted, if we weren't mindful of costs. It inevitably happened that we flew in our first in-person meeting, and booking the lowest fare available within a reasonable schedule meant we flew without checked luggage, and showed up in button-down shirts, dark chinos, and black slip-on shoes. Not the most formal attire, but certainly not pajamas and perfectly acceptable for every other client up until then. Well, not for these people. We were taken aside and told that their C-suite management was very taken aback that their provider couldn't even manage to show up in suits, proper shoes, and an ironed shirt. I was stumped, but my contractor colleague retained his cool and simply asked for a quick 2-sentence email with the requirement for suits, ironed shirts, and formal shoes. The client, surprisingly, obliged. Cue our next trip when coordinating with my colleague to book similar flight times and the same hotel. Things got interesting. First, we were flying in the evening before. Second, we were checking luggage. Third, the No Frills Hotel a little further out of town, but close enough to the client's office wouldn't do this time. Since they wanted formal attire without any creases, we'd have to check in a trolley, because 2 suits and a fresh shirt for each day plus a spare weren't going to fit in our carry-on. And since we'd have to iron any creases out, we have to book a hotel that has ironing facilities. So the business hotel downtown, it has to be this time. And the time spent ironing will be invoiced, or at least my contractor colleague will. I'll skip over the uneventful meeting and go straight to when my company's invoice and the contractor's expenses claim got rejected. Since we had the email requesting the formal wear, we argued that this was done at the client's request. The controller wouldn't budge, so the contractor immediately stopped working for the client and told my management as much, recommending I do the same. After missing a deadline and a couple of remote meetings, all with short but sweet answers that there was an outstanding payment, the controller relented. The C-suite dropped the dress code, and we dropped the client the moment the contract was done. I've since been contacted by them again through LinkedIn in an attempt to recruit me. LOL. So thanks for being with us. The RR Show is a production of Evergreen Podcasts and Wessler Media. Now, if you'd be so kind, please follow or subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. And if you're feeling extra nice, you might as well leave a 5-star review. But for more, visit the website, rrshow.com. That is rrshow.com. I'm your host, Vince. Thank you to my producer, Kevin, and we'll see you next time here on The RR Show.